Join the Brave Enough podcast with Julianne Williams. Renew, recreate, recover you.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to my podcast. This is Julianne Williams. This is Brave Enough, Renew, Recreate, Recover You. I have a really special guest today, but just for a minute, I want to let you know that I have a book launching on October 25th. It is called Unleash Her. You can find the link, I'll put it below, but it's also on my website of www.juliannewilliams.com. If you want a personally signed copy, you can order on the link that I put on my website and below. Otherwise, it will be on Amazon starting on October 25th. And my book, Head Above Water, is always available on Amazon. And if you want some inspiration on grief recovery and being resilient, both of these books are really, really great. So with that said, I have Heather Gray, FDN, aka Lyme Boss, with me today. And as I talk about, grief is not just about losing someone or a death. Grief is really about anything that we experience a loss over, or something that creates a hole or a wanting or longing in our life. And so when we see things happen in our life, such as health things come up, which I've dealt with my entire life, sometimes it changes our life very significantly. And sometimes there's a lot that we're grieving about the life we thought we would have. Or just that we're always in a battle and it's just overwhelming, and so we just have grief. So I have a person that I just introduced, Heather Gray, who has an amazing story to share with you. And so I am going to turn it over to you to go ahead and talk with us a little bit about the background, and we'll just have a great conversation.
Awesome. Thank you, Julianne. Hey, congratulations on that book. Like, that's a big deal. Like, pat on the back. That's awesome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, incredible. So yeah, thanks for having me on. Grief is, we've got a funny relationship with grief, right? Like, a lot of us do that have had chronic illness. Most people don't realize that most chronic illness actually starts with an emotion, right? It's stored in the body somewhere. And it was funny, after being undiagnosed Lyme disease for over 27 years, 3 autoimmune diseases, mold toxicity, 2 stints in the psych ward for suicide attempts. It never, I would work on the physical right after I became an FDN, because it's easy to read a test result, right? And then, work off that test result, work off that lab, right? My adrenals are low. Okay, well, let's take something and do some things that help my adrenals. And it got me better, but it only got me so much better, right? Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until that I actually started to come back around after years of relapsing before I realized that I had to incorporate that mental, emotional component to healing, right? There's so many of us that if you think about it, if your nervous systems are turned on, right, and they're stuck on, like they are in a chronic illness, and nothing turns and activates your nervous system as much as mold does. So if you've got sensitivities towards molds and you've got those issues in your DNA, like even after you're out of the fire, it's like the alarm bells are still going off in the brain. So the fire's gone, but the alarm is still, sounding. And it's really, you can't heal, mm-hmm. right, when you're in that fight or flight. You can't heal. I have a crazy calendar.
And yes, we have a guest today, Jody.
What's her name?
Jody, the rescue cat. Oh. She comes on every so often.
Mine doesn't want anything to do with me, and when I'm working for some reason, it kind of bumped me out. But she gives me my space. But as I was saying, so when you're stuck with the tiger, right, that's constantly out to get you, and your nervous system is on all the time, and there's a tiger in the room. You can't heal when you're like this.
That's true.
Just when you're like this. You're not going to want to have sex when you're like this, because your body is using all that energy to run away from the tiger. And so it makes sense that, that was like the piece the missing piece to my puzzle. There was a lot, right? But mm-hmm. that was like kind of the final piece of really getting my nervous system chilled down a few notches so that my body then could heal.
So how did you go 27 years without a diagnosis?
That was a whole reason for grieving all on its own. There's so many reasons to grieve.
Right?
My lost childhood. Like you said, the life that we didn't get to have.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the guilt that I still carry, that I still work with, I'm working around, working with to, clear is, guilt over my kid's childhood, because he had a very sick, reactive, angry mother, up until she was the age of 10, before I started getting answers. That's a good question. I had seen practitioner after practitioner after practitioner. My first suicide attempt was when I was 15. And at the time, nobody was trying to dig deeper on why this 15-year-old was trying to take herself out. They just put me on prescription drugs, pat me on the head, told me that I was attention-seeking, and sent me out the door. So all the labs looked normal, like most people here, but you obviously don't feel normal, so damn it, people, do your job. Obviously, there's something more going on here, but nobody was digging deeper. It wasn't until I saw a physician's assistant back in 2013 who, within 5 minutes of talking to her, she got this little twinkle in her eye, and she had this really cool accent. I don't know where she was from, but she's like, I know exactly what's wrong with you. And I'm thinking, I'm calling bullshit. No, there's no way, right? 5 minutes, there's no freaking way you know what's wrong with me. And she goes, yeah, have you ever been bit by a tick? I said, yeah, when I was 13. And she's like, I think you have Lyme disease. And I'm like, I'm sorry, a citrus disease? I don't understand. It was very bizarre. And then that was kind of what started that journey. And then I was diagnosed celiac, and then I was diagnosed Hashimoto's, and then I was diagnosed endometriosis. So finally getting some answers, but really it all stemmed back to peeling back those layers of grief, of emotion, of anger, of sadness, all the things that I never let myself feel. That got stuck in my nervous system.
So after you got your diagnosis, obviously at first it was probably a bit of a relief, because it's like, oh my gosh, I finally am validated. I'm, for all these things that I've experienced. After that, though, how did you feel after you sort of got over that relief? Did you then realize, oh my gosh, this is something I'm gonna have to deal with forever? Or what were your thoughts?
So it's funny. So one of these days I'm going to write a book, and the title is going to be, I Told You I'm Not Crazy, The Realities of Lyme Disease, because that was the first thing I screamed at the top of my lung. I still remember driving down I-25 in Colorado from Denver to Fort Collins, crying, just streaming tears. And I screamed that out. I told you I'm not crazy, because that's, and the more and the louder you scream that, the more they go, that's what a crazy person would say. So you get even more dismissed. And I'm actually wanting to start some sort of a campaign to get rid of the C word, because it pisses me off on so many levels. Because when you get labeled crazy, that's it. You're done. The stigma that comes along with that, so even if I am operating at 90% on a regular basis, but that 10% of the time I struggle and I have mental health issues, I get lumped into having mental health issues all the time. And so I actually this week I started making some memes of, I'm not crazy, my brain is just inflamed, right? Or I'm not crazy, your brain inflammation is showing. Just trying to get a different sense around this word and mental health issues in general, because they're still so misunderstood. And like I said, the stigma that comes along with it is just ridiculous. But so, sorry, my little rant.
No, actually, I just want to, so, my book here, Head Above Water, it's the story of me getting my feet back on the ground after losing my husband to suicide. He was 38, I was 36, I had 2 little kids, and that's what prompted all of this for starting, is really wanting to make a difference in a number of areas, but one of them being around mental health. So everything you're saying, that's exactly, the stigma is something that I really think does a disservice to everybody in society, because we become afraid and we become embarrassed and shamed to go and get help, because we don't want to be labeled crazy. And by the way, it's no different than I have a heart problem, diabetes, cancer. There's no difference. It's a physical issue in the brain chemicals. And so, my husband lost his life because we were unable to get treatment, partially because, we had every resource, but partially because he was misdiagnosed and was on the wrong medication for a long time. And then partially because he wouldn't tell anybody. because he was embarrassed and he didn't want to be looked down upon. And, that cost him his life. It cost me, my husband, it cost my children their father. And so, it's really like, when I saw some of your stuff, this is why I was so interested in having you on, because you have like this so many facets to what it is that your mission is. And so, yes, and I want to, if we can, if it's not too sensitive, talk a little bit about how do you, I tell people all the time that I know if my husband would have been able to live, he would be happy today that he was alive, that he would be so like joyous to see how his kids have turned out and the life he would have had. And so if it's not too sensitive, if you want to share just, you attempted twice and you're still here.
Oh, absolutely. I am. So I got a funny little caveat though off that.
Yeah.
So thank you for reminding me. There's still a little bit of brain damage from, like I said, you can't have a critter in your system for that long without having some long-term damage. And I operate at a very, very high level compared to most folks that I know because of the lifestyle and what I've done for treatment. But I do have some memory issues sometimes. So that's why I was like, what are we talking about?
No, it's fine.
Thank you for reminding me. Yes, my uncle had killed himself when he was 4. My son was 2 stents in the psych ward for trying to kill himself. And then a couple, and those were just the 2 times that I was kind of caught. Like there were many times that I probably should have gone. So yes, this is a topic that is very near and dear to my heart. And it wasn't just 2 years ago, I was fired from a health company because I had posted something on social media that was supposed to be inspirational. I was talking about what a dark place I was earlier in that day, but then I said the things that I did to help pull myself out. And I got fired. I was put on a leave and told that it didn't look good on their end to have somebody like me working for a health company.
Wow.
And they had 4 people very active in social media who were overweight working for this health company, right? So that's what you were just saying. You've got heart issues. You've got these other issues. Like it pissed me off. It's like, how is this any different than any of the health issues that your clients that your employees have working for this health company? And then I just recently ran into it again with another. I was looking for part-time coaching with a health practitioner who saw something that I wrote on my social media on my DNA test that I just recently had. And it said that I have this cool, rare haplotype that when you have a certain genetic copy of this one and a certain genetic copy of this one, that actually one cancels the other one out, and you have a problem with uptaking serotonin.
Oh.
Right? Talk about validating. Like,
right?
That thing was, like, talk about validating. Like, there's not something like, yes, there is something wrong with me, but it's not something that I can just fix.
Absolutely.
Right? And so again, I was talking about that on social media, and she said that I was not appropriate on social media. And so now the more and more that I'm kind of getting told that what I'm saying is not appropriate, and it almost makes me want to scream it even louder because people need to hear this. This has got to stop. We've got to stop doing this to people. We've got to stop calling them crazy. We've got to stop slapping that label on them, because just like you said, I will never shut up. That's just how I'm wired. But there are other people that if they got that kind of backlash, 1, they're not even going to say anything to begin with, like your husband. And 2, if they get that backlash, they'll never say it again. Right. Right. Because it doesn't feel safe. And we need to create places where people can express themselves, whether they're talking about their diabetes or they're talking about their mental health issues, because they really are no different. They are rooted in a physical cause, and then rooted also with an emotional, trauma, nervous system type issue, so. Right. Yeah.
Well, and that's sad, because, I mean, from a health company standpoint, I would want someone who is compassionate to the people that I'm serving. I mean, if someone, usually when we go through something, we learn more about it, and we're very, we can become very compassionate, and also become passionate to where we are just become an expert. And that's why I would want taking care of me or coaching me or, whatever it is. So I'm very sorry that you had that experience.
Someone who's walked the walk. Yeah. I was on a work call a week after they put me on a leave, because they put me on leave before they fired me. So I didn't realize I didn't know I was fired at the time. Oh. but I was on a work call and they said that they were hiring again. And if they knew anybody that wasn't crazy and wasn't flaky, to please pass along their information. I knew exactly right then and there who they were talking about. And it hurt because, like I said, people who know me, know my heart and know my work ethic and know I don't give up my tenacity, and to be just blankly, made crazy. Like all of a sudden I'm just, everything I've done is just dismissed with that one word.
Well, and that's it. So that's it. And that's why, for me, the stigma, and this is why I wrote the book, and this is why I have my YouTube channel, my podcast, and I probably seem crazy to other people because I don't like that. I am very, very passionate about nobody else losing their life and a family having to suffer like mine has. And the more we perpetuate what you've just experienced, the less likely people are going to be to get help and to talk about it. And we just continue this terrible cycle.
Amen. I knew there's a reason I booked this. Thank you. I might not have remembered at the time. I know things that aren't resonant. So I know I'm like, there's a reason I'm supposed to be here. I just don't remember why.
Yeah, but look, we figured that out in about 2 seconds. You're like, oh yeah, I can do this. So
I remember you, sister.
Yeah, exactly. So that's our mental health thing. But in terms of resilience, I mean, you really have had to fight and fight and fight. What are even like you said, you were feeling really low. What are some of the things, if you were going to share with somebody, when I'm not having a good time in my day, when I'm feeling very low, when I'm feeling overwhelmed, blah, blah, whatever those feelings are that you have, what do you recommend to someone? What are your tips? Because that's what I think people need to know is, how do I lift myself up? That's how you learn resilience.
Absolutely. So there's some short-term things, and then there's some digging deeper, looking into your DNA type things. And so short-term things, I am the master at getting back to the foundations of health. Because what I said about your brain being inflamed, there's a lot of things that causes brain inflammation in food, diet, lack of sleep, blood sugar issues, sitting in front of a computer all day, not getting sunshine, not getting fresh air, not getting fresh water. So start at the basics. I think the biggest problem that we humans have these days is we are living a life humans were not designed to live. Our stress is too high. We are up too late. We're eating crap that is not food. We're drinking water that is not water. We're not getting enough fresh air. And it's amazing what happens when we get back to the basics. I'm not some yes, I run labs and yes, I dig deeper. And I would easily say 90% of the time, most of my clients are done within my 2 to 3 month program. I've only had 2 clients that I've had to take out a year or so. They were deeper, complex, mold, Lyme, a lot of the same stuff that I did. But most of my folks easily get back to the basics and miracles happen. The reason why I dug deeper into my DNA is because I am doing the basics and I was still having some swings. I was still having some issues, right? And so I'll continue to dig deeper because that's just who I am as a person. I'll continue to shake because whatever I learn on my path, I'm going to be able to teach the next person, and it was funny when he came to me as a client, I didn't think he was going to be a tough client as, case wise. Mm-hmm. And then I was for the longest time, I'm man, I don't know. This might be, above my head. This might be out of my control, but I mean, really he's just followed along in the footsteps as I've been walking. Right. And mm-hmm. he's making great strides and he's putting stuff out all over social media right now, so it's a beautiful thing, but for anybody, just to start with the basics. I mean, number one, breathing. Most of us are shallow breathers, hold our breath, box breathing is a ridiculous, easy, fast tool. Start with a count of 4. At some point, try to work up to 7 or 8, because the longer that hold at the bottom and the longer the hold at the top, really will help shift that nervous system out of fight or flight. But I think the biggest thing is to practice these tools when you're not in crisis. Mm-hmm. Anything else, muscle memory, right? You've got to practice these things when you don't, when the 5 alarm fire isn't going on. So that way, when you're in it, you can actually pull from those tools. But if you haven't gotten that practice down, it is impossible to remember what you're supposed to do while you're in it.
Well, and, talking about breathing, one of the things, if you think about when we're grieving, when we're sad, when we're, in that moment, one of the things I remember feeling, and I found that it's true with most everybody, is that's one of the first things people say is, I can't breathe. Right? Because that our body, the reaction that we automatically get just is that it just stops because it's overstimulated and it's trying to get back to homeostasis. And breathing is, when we're grieving, it becomes very shallow, and also people tend to hold their breath a lot because of the tension in their body and whatnot. So you're right. And, for people who don't know what box breathing is, it's sort of like, inhaling and holding and exhaling and holding all at the same time. So like she was saying, 4 seconds. So inhale 4, hold 4, exhale 4, hold 4, inhale 4. And you just and it just relaxes your body. So it is very effective, but you do have to, like you said, you have to be aware of it and you have to practice it.
Absolutely. Another one that's really easy that I love doing is putting my feet on the bare ground. Like, it's called grounding or earthing. I have a teenage son, stepson still at home, and he was like all angsty, crawling out of the skin. And I said, get your butt outside and put your feet on the grass. And he like, rah, 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 rah. I watched him within 4 minutes, like his whole body shifted. And by the time he came back inside, completely different kid, totally crazy. But he was also getting some vitamin D, because most Americans are actually very deficient in vitamin D. If you go to the doctor and you have it tested and it says it's 30 and you're in range, really functional lab, you should be between 60 and 80. Because think about it. Western medicine, their lab ranges are looking for disease processes only. If you actually want to function optimally, you need to switch those numbers around. So he was getting vitamin D, he was getting fresh air, and he was getting those negative ions from the earth, discharging a lot of these EMFs and the stuff that we get from our technology. Like I'm sitting in front of 2 lights and a camera and 2 computer screens. After this, I'm going to go outside and put my feet on the ground just so I can kind of help discharge some of this stuff.
Yeah. And I mean, if you think about it, when things get hard, just if you go take a walk, even just a quick walk around the block, just get out, change the scenery, get exposed to nature, like you said, it can be as easy as, for me, the best thing ever is to put my feet in the sand. That's to me the piece of heaven that I get sometimes.
Yeah, I learned that one about 10 years ago for the first time when I went to Florida, and was walking along the beach picking up shells, and was for the first time in my life, I felt calm. And I was like, what is this? Like, this is incredible. Like, I'm moving. That's it. I'm moving to Florida. I'm still going to make it back. I'm still going to make it there. I've got one more kid to graduate high school, and then I'm out. Colorado, this time of year is absolutely spectacular. The trees this year are, they're incredible. I can't get over how colorful and vivid they all are. We're having a beautiful Indian summer, but for the most part, the high, dry climate, altitude, snow, cold, I belong next to the beach with my feet in the sand.
Me too, and I try. So, okay, so, what else? So then those are some of the simple things you do. And for me, like if I'm having a day where I just feel overwhelmed, or I'm missing my husband, or wishing my life was, and by the way, I love my life. So I say it all the time, but that doesn't mean I don't wish for him to be back. But, some of those days, I find sometimes I need to listen to music. Maybe it's that I, call a friend. So really, like you said, figuring out what are those things that help you and know them before you end up in crisis, so that, like, oh my gosh, I am not having a good day. I think I just need to call, my mom. Or, and then that helps you kind of get to a better place. Or I just need to go outside and ground or whatever. So then what are some of the more complex things you've done? Because I'm actually super interested in all of those things.
So digging deeper with some labs, because So like I said, the DNA, finding that out about my serotonin, holy cow, what a game changer. Finding out that I have issues in my detox pathways. And if you think about it, if you become toxic and inflamed, all the talk therapy in the world, all the Xanax in the world, all the Prozac in the world is not going to help if you are inflamed and toxic, right? I wasn't sweating at the time. I wasn't pooping every day. I had no idea that that wasn't a good thing. My detoxing has become like my favoriteest pastime ever. Like I have a sauna blanket that I get in 3 or 4 times a week with binders plus skin brushing. I do coffee enemas, castor oil packs, because I've got these issues, and for the first time like in ever, I'm functioning, like I said, at a really high level. So I love my detoxing. But then the other thing that I do for folks is I'll test for pyrrole disorder. And so pyrroles are a byproduct of oxidative stress.
Okay.
Almost everybody has oxidative stress. And so our bodies can't use them. So we try to just excrete them out of urine. But on their way out of our body, they suck up zinc and they suck up B vitamins. And this causes a lot of anxiety and depression because we need these things for proper neurotransmitter support and all kinds of other support in our body. So something as simple as testing for pyrrole disorder and then giving more zinc and supporting your body in these ways sometimes can be some low-hanging fruit on helping give people some breathing room, right, between them and their anxiety, between them and their depression.
That is fascinating because after my husband died, I developed a blood disorder. So everything was normal, and then I developed a blood disorder. And they were not really able to figure it out totally, except that I had a deficiency in zinc and vitamin B, all my Bs, especially 12. And so I had to give myself injections and take very high levels of copper. And luckily, I only have one abnormality now, 17 years later. But I know it was caused from the stress and the trauma. So then you just sort of, I was like, well, isn't that fascinating how that may fit together? Because it was exactly those minerals and vitamins.
Exactly, and like in copper excess. So no, I don't hear of too much copper these days as I hear of copper excess because, copper IUDs, copper piping, different ways that people get copper. But women who have genetic issues in their DNA, when they have a baby, copper goes up because baby needs copper to develop properly. But then we have the baby and we can't detox it like we're supposed to because we have those issues in our genetics. And so it just keeps recirculating and causing copper excess copper, which also causes anxiety and depression. And so they were saying like something close to like 40% of postpartum depression need to check their copper levels after having a baby. And it could be something as simple as copper excess. Like, so there's a lot of reasonings for why people on a physical level. But you can't just focus on the physical. You've got to bring in, and that's one thing I do now with my clients is I bring in somatic experiencing work. I bring in breath work. I have a new kind of like a biofeedback machine that I work remotely with people that will actually test imbalances in your voice to look for mental emotional issues, and then it'll suggest these homeopathic remedies to help balance those mental emotional issues. So I've put a lot of mental emotional work in with the physical because I know that's when people get better. You can't just sit and meditate your way out of it, and you can't sit and just focus on the physical. Like you really have to marry all of it together because everything is connected.
It is. I agree 100%. So thinking about, like where you are today, what do you think were the top keys for, obviously the diagnosis was probably the real big turning point. So you would know what you were dealing with, but what were some of the keys of, you're grieving this whole loss.
After my divorce, I swear to God, I felt like I cried for like 3 years straight, but that was mostly because I wasn't allowed to cry as a kid. Like, if you showed weakness in my family, they tore you apart like a pack of wolves. Like, it was thought of as a weakness. very bullied and picked on. So it was like years and years and years. And it was no wonder that, I'm 13 and I developed a chronic illness. And a lot of that had to do with early childhood trauma.
Mm-hmm.
The higher your ACE score, the more apt you are to have autoimmune diseases and other chronic health issues. So the research is finally starting to catch up that, it used to piss me off, Dr. Phil, talk about rising above your raising.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was just something you could just snap your fingers and do, and not realizing that it was harmful, because that like dismisses and doesn't validate people's childhood experiences. And we're learning now that what happens in childhood absolutely will cause and wreak havoc in your adult life.
Well, and it's the whole epigenetics thing, right? Where,
Absolutely.
it just everything, and we even pass it along.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah. So don't let anybody freaking gaslight you into not feeling your experience, or taking away your experiencing and making it, less than what it was for you, because you felt it. You're the one that lives through it, and it was very real for you. So that's another thing I say quite often is feel your feelings, just don't live there.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So I had to learn how to actually feel my feelings, and when I'm upset, naming them, letting myself cry, letting myself get angry, letting myself get whatever it needs that I get, and letting that move through me instead of getting it stuck in me and causing disease. But I just don't live there. Like the spinning part, a lot of and actually that showed up in my DNA too, that I actually more predispositions to spin. I'm one of those people that'll take something and I'll just keep it going. And so it's been a fascinating journey for sure.
Well, because when you learn something like that, then you realize, okay, just like anything else, I'm predisposed. If you have a history of cancer in your family, I'm predisposed to this if it's a genetic type of illness. And so then you can say, what are the things I need to do? So we know if, we have a predisposition to breast cancer, then we get our mammograms more often, that we think about what our diet is, the things that make us more likely to contract breast cancer, and so on and so forth. And it's the same thing. And that's why I just keep saying it over and over. I know, but I really want people to understand that what happens in our mind is physical. It's no different. And so, and we just need to give people the freedom to talk about it. And also that gives pause to the medical community to say, we better take more time with this. It's really important that we do more studies. It's really important that we look at what we're developing in terms of medications. It's really important about how we diagnose. What are our assessment skills and tools? And, until we get there, it just, again, people end up in this place where they think the only way out is to take their life.
Absolutely, yeah. And there's another way, and I thank God every day that I was given the strength and whatever lifeline I needed at the time to get me through those dark places, and that I'm still here, and that now I can be a beacon of light for others, kind of going through the same thing, because too many of us have slipped through the cracks, and I'm here to help repair that.
I love it. Well, everybody, I learned so much today, and I am going to talk to you a little bit more after we stop recording. But the reality is that, I think Heather is proof that, first of all, we should never give up when we know there's something that's not right with us. We know ourselves better than anybody. Second of all, she, again, validated that, mental health is physical. And then there are things that we can do, but we should not dismiss the things that we experience in our mind and let ourselves be called crazy, because that's just not okay. It is real. And the last thing I'd say is thank you for sharing those strategies, because I think when people are in the depths of depression and sadness, sometimes they just don't know what to do to get out, and they feel like a burden. And so really sharing a couple of things that you do for them to think about when they are in a place that they can condition themselves to it, like box breathing, grounding, to know that when they're in that crisis, these are some things you can do that interrupt that cycle.
Absolutely. And another thing, I just recently came out with a mini cooking series called Real Cooking for Real Life, right? a couple meals that you can make healthy underneath 20 minutes. You can find it on my website, discoveringhealthfdn.com. But that's really the basics of kind of where you should start, because most folks, like I said, if you go to your therapist and you go to your talk therapy, right, and then you leave and you go hit McDonald's and you have a Big Mac and soda, you're inflaming your gut, which is inflaming your brain, and it just makes the prescription that you're on, the therapy that you're doing, whatever it is you're doing, 10 times harder and sometimes not even work. I think where a lot of this like treatment resistant depression sometimes comes from just being so inflamed. And so that's why I made that cooking series. So it's funny, it's educational, and it's teaching you how to make healthy, delicious meals like under 20 minutes or less, because who the hell has time to be in the kitchen any longer than that? So that's part of the reason why I put that together. So I hope you go check that out.
Oh, I will. And so because of the resource that Heather is, I'll get all of her information for you. It'll be linked in the bottom so that you can reach out to her, you can find her, you can look at her recipes and cooking show. And if you need coaching, she would be, I think a great person to reach out to. So we'll get all that information down below. And, I am just grateful that we connected on social media, and I just admire you so much and think that the work you're doing is really, really important. And I know that I have learned a lot from you, and I just am thankful for your time today.
Back at you, sister. Thank you so much.
All right. Well, everybody, thank you again. Again, you can reach me at www.juliannewilliams.com, and like, share, and subscribe, and help us get that message out there. So thank you, everyone.
If you are inspired by this podcast, leave a review and share it with your friends. You can always connect with Julianne Williams at juliannewilliams.com.